God, how did they get in my contacts? How did that happen? How do I have their phone number and their name and my, yeah, the phone sucked it in. Like, sucked it in from where? It's laughable. It's ridiculous. It's insulting.
So recently, Glenn Greenwald had a podcast about the latest development in the Mike Waltz and Yemen strike and signal leak story. And Mike Waltz recently appeared on the Laura Ingraham show on Fox News to kind of give his explanation as to how this happened, how Jeffrey Goldberg was added to the signal chat. Let's just say it doesn't seem like Glenn is buying the explanation, but I want to hear what he has to say, so let's watch and let's react.
Mike Waltz went on Laura Ingraham last night, and I just want to give you this sense for how preposterous this has now become, how insulting so many of these explanations are. Laura Ingraham, to her credit, wanted to know how it is that Jeffrey Goldberg's phone number ended up saved in Mike Waltz's phone and why that happened. Now, I don't know how many of you have used Signal before, but when you open the Signal app, the only people with whom you can start communicating are people who are saved in your phone. You have to have somebody saved in your phone in order to send them a message. You can't just type a random number in. And then if you create a new Signal group that permits you to speak with multiple Signal users at once, you have to add people to your group, and the only options that you have are people whose contacts are saved in your phone. If you want to add somebody whose contact is not saved in your phone, you have to first save their contact in your phone. That's the only way you can add them to a Signal group. I understand why Mike Waltz doesn't want to admit that he had Jeffrey Goldberg's number saved in his phone. Because Jeffrey Goldberg is one of the most dishonest and one of the most vehemently anti-Trump media people in all of Washington. And Trump, Mike Waltz's boss, harbors a severe hatred for Jeffrey Goldberg. As you saw with Pete Hegseth, Trump has said similar things. They hate Jeffrey Goldberg.
Yeah, Goldberg has spread the fine people hoax, the losers and suckers hoax, all these left-wing hoaxes against Trump during Trump's campaign and during Trump's presidency. So even if Mike Waltz aligns with him on foreign policy, it does look like a total embarrassment if he has him saved in his phone, and if that's the foundation for adding him to Signal. That's what he can admit. And frankly, I'm a little surprised that he's even willing to go on these shows and talk about it, because it just gets more and more preposterous.
And if they know that Mike Waltz is chatting with Jeffrey Goldberg or has his contact information saved in his phone, and if he's, why would you have that saved in your phone if you weren't actually chatting with him? That would be something that would trigger Donald Trump's rage. Like, you have Jeffrey Goldberg, you talk to Jeffrey Goldberg? And so instead of just admitting that this is what happened, he was too scared to admit that he had Jeffrey Goldberg's phone number saved in his phone. To Laura Ingraham's credit, and I'm not surprised at all that she did it, she's done it many times before, she quite persistently and adversarially questioned Mike Waltz on this very question. I want you to listen to the utter babbling, the preposterous defense, the attempts to justify how this could have happened that came out of Mike Waltz's mouth. Remember, this is the National Security Advisor, the person closest to the president on matters of national security, somebody responsible for possessing and analyzing and safeguarding the most sensitive secrets that our government possesses. Here's his attempt to explain away how he had Jeffrey Goldberg's number in his phone.
And I know him in the sense that he hates the president, but I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone, and we're going to figure out how this happened.
So you don't know what staffer is responsible for this right now?
Well, look, a staffer wasn't responsible, and look, I take full responsibility. I built.
No, you don't. The whole thing is subterfuge from taking responsibility. I don't even have to hear the next part of his argument to know that he's skirting responsibility on this. We will listen, but it's clear he's not taking responsibility. If he did, he'd say, yeah, I've conversed with Goldberg. You know, he might even lie and say, hey, we don't even share all the same beliefs on foreign policy. He does, by the way. But he should at least say that if he wants to actually take responsibility.
the group to my job is to make sure everything's coordinated.
But how did the number?
Execute
I mean, I don't mean to be pedantic here, but how did the number?
Have you ever had somebody's contact that shows their name, and then you have somebody else's number there?
I never make those mistakes.
Right? You got somebody else's number on someone else's contact. So of course I didn't see this loser in the group. It looked like someone else. Now whether he did it deliberately or it happened in some other technical mean is something we're trying to figure out.
So your staffer did not put his contact information.
No,
but how did it end up in your phone?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay, but that's a pretty big problem.
That's what we've got the best technical minds, right?
That's disturbing.
And that's where, I mean, I'm sure everybody out there has had a contact where it was said one person and then a different phone number.
But you've never talked to him before, so how's the number on your phone? I mean, I'm not an expert in any of this, but it's just curious. How's the number on your phone?
Well, if you have somebody else's contact and then somehow it gets
someone
sucked
sent
in,
you that
it gets
contact.
sucked in.
Was there someone else supposed to be on the chat that wasn't on the chat that you thought was?
So
on
the
the chat?
person that I thought was on there was never on there. It was this
Who
guy.
Was that? What person?
Well, I'm not. Look, okay. Laura, I take responsibility. I built the group.
Okay.
So but look, that's the part that we have to figure out.
It's so funny to watch him just twist himself into a pretzel, and credit to Laura Ingraham here. She actually pushed him on this. And this is a guy that's really closely connected to Trump. Again, he's the national security advisor. For a Fox News host to press him like that is actually pretty redeemable, if you're asking me. I'm not a huge Laura Ingraham fan. There's lots of things I disagree with her on, and always really have. But to her credit, she really stuck it to him. And Glenn's dropping the hammer here, too, because everyone knows this is so preposterous. And for the Trumpians that say this is 4D chess to do this deliberately, that's equally preposterous.
Oh, we have to convene all of the greatest technological minds and the scientists and the computer experts and security experts from all around the world to investigate how it possibly could be the case that Jeffrey Goldberg's contact information and phone number was stored in Mike Waltz's phone, sufficient to allow Mike Waltz to put him into the signal group. And when Laura Ingraham said to him, What do you mean? Like, how did the number get saved in your phone if you never talked to him? Like, how did it get saved there? He's like, oh, well, what happens is, I'm sure you had this experience. It's like, sometimes this contact you have saved has a totally different number of a different, has that ever happened to you? But then she still said, like, okay, given that's the case, Jeffrey Goldberg's phone number and contact information ended up in your phone.
This is truly Glenn at his best. He's not going to take this explanation, and Glenn's way too smart to let this pass. Again, I'm very surprised that Waltz was even willing to go on these shows, knowing that these journalists and these television anchors have the opportunity to actually study how Signal works. They had like 24 hours to do that. So they can call him out on whatever absurd story he's going to have about not knowing Jeffrey Goldberg, because he clearly knew Jeffrey Goldberg.
And it was identified as Jeffrey Goldberg. The graphic in the Signal chat said JG, which is Jeffrey Goldberg's initials. And he said, oh, yeah, what happens is, like, when this happens, the number gets sucked in. It gets sucked in. It's totally what happens. Like, the iPhone, like, oh, yeah, so many times. You know, there are these people who I don't want to talk to, who I'm not supposed to talk to, but my iPhone just sucks in their contact information and their name. And I'm like, oh my God, how did they get in my contacts? How did that happen? How do I have their phone number and their name in my, the phone sucked it in. Like, sucked it in from where? It's laughable. It's ridiculous. It's insulting.
Yeah, Glenn is so right here. Waltz is clearly lying, and this ends up looking like such an embarrassment. Not only for Waltz, but also for the Trump administration. I think it made Pete Hegseth look pretty bad, too, because if you remember the leaked messages from Hegseth, he was talking about how to propagandize this to the American people to sell this strike to them. And he said, number one, Biden was weak, and number two, connection to Iran. Because he knows that there'd have to be some explanation for this. He seemed to care more about selling it than he did the actual operational justification for it, the morality of it, the constitutionality of it. All that went to the wayside. But yeah, Waltz clearly knew Goldberg. And the reason I think it's so laughable too, some of these Trumpians that are like, yeah, this was a 4D chess move, a great move, to, scare Europe or, make it seem like, hey, they have to take account for their own shipping and stuff. That's so equally preposterous too, because this ends up looking really bad for Mike Waltz and Trump. I mean, this guy invited one of the most anti-Trumpian hoaxsters in the world into this chat. And I do think that was inadvertent, but he clearly had contact with Goldberg before. Glenn is right to call it out. This was clearly a mishap on his part, and he clearly had a connection to Waltz. But I do want to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments below if you think that there's any chance that this happened just, through a bug in Signal system and that Waltz had no prior contact with Goldberg. I want to know if you honestly think that and why. Let me know in the comments. And until next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out. I'll see you guys in the next one.